Sara Allen is our in-house DNA expert. She has been giving programs for us on DNA every first Thursday of the month. And before that, she headed our DNA interest group here at the Genealogy Center. She's a phenomenal genealogist, and we are super pleased to have her give another DNA program for us. Welcome, Sara.
Thank you. All right. Before we get started with the PowerPoint, I wanted to tell you all that this is a part 2. So if you did not see part 1, I want to show you how you can get there. So I'm going to share my screen and take you to the Genealogy Center website, which I have lost. Okay, I had it here. Sorry. So it's genealogycenter.org. And under Genealogy Community, which Allison just took you to a minute ago, you find YouTube. And so part 1 of this talk tonight is already on YouTube. So it's called, and I'm just going to scroll down here because it's not very far down. It's called, oh, now I can't find it. Okay. Working with Autosomal DNA Matches for Beginners. So here it is. This is part 1 of tonight's talk. So I would suggest that you do watch part 1 at some point in time. You don't have to watch it before tonight, but it would probably make the most sense for you if you did. All right. So with that said, as Allison said, tonight's program is also going to be recorded. So in the future, this part 2 is going to be on YouTube as well. So you could watch part 1 and part 2 consecutively, and because they build upon each other. Okay, so as I said, this is Working with Autosomal DNA Matches for Beginners, part 2. And just a quick review from part 1. So real quick review from the beginning is what these are autosomal testing companies. There's 4 major autosomal DNA testing companies, and that's Ancestry DNA, Family Tree DNA's Family Finder Test, MyHeritage DNA, and 23andMe. All right. And with your autosomal DNA, you are basically inheriting DNA from all of your ancestors. So you're going to inherit DNA from your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, all the way back to probably your 5th or 6th great-grandparents. You'll have a little sliver of their DNA and maybe a little bit further back. And that is how you end up with DNA matches. These are other people that descend from the same ancestors. So your autosomal DNA test can help you with several things. One of the things it can help you with is if you find multiple DNA matches that descend from one of your genealogical ancestor couples, you can usually mark that couple off as verified genetically. And autosomal DNA can also help you if you're an adoptee to find your birth family. And that is not really covered in this talk tonight. So here's my genealogical tree. And so my genealogical tree, these are people who I have researched. And I found their names listed in different genealogical records. And so I believe that they are my ancestors. You can see here that the couple that I have circled over onto the right-hand side, George Brown and Sarah Kennedy, are my 2nd great-grandparents, according to the tree. Now, when I look at my DNA match list, I actually have DNA matches that descend from this couple. And so this lends credence to the fact that they really are my 2nd great-grandparents. You can see that the couple is at the top. I have a match to a descendant of their son, James. and that's this match J here. I have 2 matches from their son, descended from their son Fred, and they're not named. And then I have 1 match from their son Albert, and that's this TS. Then you can see that I descend from Alice Brown, their daughter Alice Brown. Here's me down here. Then they had a couple of other children, Estella, Ida Mae, and Harvey over here on the left. And so far, I don't have any DNA matches to descendants of those children, but we get new matches every day. And so I assume that one day I probably will get a shared match or a match with a descendant of one of those other children. Now, so those descendants of George and Sadie include me, and they include those other matches that I just showed you. So George and Sadie are our common ancestor couple, and we all inherited DNA from them. And that is why we are matches, because we have this common ancestor couple, George and Sadie, and we all inherited DNA from them. And some of those little segments of DNA are going to be the same, and some of them are going to be different. But it's enough DNA that we show up on each other's DNA match list. So this is an important concept for you to know about when you're looking at your autosomal DNA matches. That's how really kind of how you're related to those people, is through a common ancestor couple, and you're trying to find out who that common ancestor couple was. Now, a further review of what we learned in part 1. So in part 1, the scenario basically was that you're a beginner. And I know some of you are not really super beginners, but this was a scenario that we worked on last time in part 1, was that you're a beginner, you're opening up your match list for the first time, and you're trying to make sense of it. You're like, well, what does this mean? Who are these matches? What do I do with this information? And so I encouraged you to familiarize yourself with your DNA matches page and your individual match page. So you have an individual match page with each match. So I just said, click on things, see what happens when you click on it. Use the back button to get back. If you have, if you see a question mark, usually that means you can click on the question mark and it will answer some questions that you might have about that particular page or that particular feature. So just play around and get very comfortable with the DNA matches page. Then you want to learn about estimated relationships. The DNA testing company does not know how that match is related to you. Exactly. They are going to give you an estimated relationship. They might tell you it's a first to second cousin. And they may be really spot on about that. The person could be a first cousin or a second cousin, or they might be a really high level third cousin. So it's kind of an estimate, and sometimes it's more accurate than others. And you have to figure out yourself how you're related to that person by comparing trees, basically. And then I said, I wanted you to try to identify your known matches and add notes explaining the relationship in the DNA match page. And then I wanted you to sort your matches into groups by the most recent common ancestor couple. So when we talk about identifying known matches, I basically said you want to look at matches whose names you recognize. Obviously, some of your matches, unless you're adopted, and this program tonight is not really for adopted people so much. I have done a program for adopted people. It's on our YouTube. But so you're going to recognize some of the names of your matches as known relatives. You're going to see cousin Bobby on there, or cousin Bobby's daughter, or even a further back relative. You might recognize the name in the tree of your match. You might receive a common ancestor hint at either Ancestry or MyHeritage DNA, indicating the possible most recent common ancestor couple. Those are all going to be known matches. And I suggested that you organize those matches into groups of matches. And at Ancestry and at MyHeritage, you can do groupings basically within the website. And so you're clicking on in Ancestry here, you're clicking on this groups right here, and you can make a new group or you can add to an existing group that I already created. So these are groups that I created. and they're common ancestor couples. So they're couples that were married or had children together in my tree, and they're color coded, and my heritage will also be color coded. 23andMe and Family Tree DNA do not allow you to do this kind of grouping within their company's website. So I suggested that you use a spreadsheet, or maybe a tablet of paper, actual paper, pen and paper, or some other method that makes sense to you to keep track of how you are related to your matches, the known matches that you were able to identify. And I told you to go through your match list as far down as you could go, down into the third and the fourth cousin range, if you could, because the farther down you get into your match list with you identifying these known matches, the easier it will be to identify unknown matches. So basically tonight, I'm hoping that you've already done all the steps that we just talked about from part 1. So where you've identified your known matches and placed them into groups, and you've made copious notes about who they are and how you might be related to them. All of the DNA companies allow you to make notes. This would be on the individual match page. And these notes are only seen by you. So it's really for your own benefit that you make these notes. And I will say this again, and I said this last time, you might think you might never forget who this match is. And then, you know, two years later, you open up your match list and you stare at the name and you say, I don't remember who that is. So better to make notes about it now and just put down all the information that you figured out so you have it there and you can refer to it later. So after you completed these steps that we talked about in part 1, this will help you to identify unknown matches. So we're going to be identifying unknown matches by using known matches. And this may not make sense to you right now, but let's get into it and let's talk it through. So we're going to look at identifying unknown matches tonight. And so what I want you to do, and this is your homework, is basically to start at the top of your match list again. And at the top of your match list are the people that are most closely related to you. And you're going to work on identifying those unknown matches. And the unknown matches could be people where you don't recognize their name, they don't have a tree, or they have a private tree, or maybe their tree does not contain any surnames that you recognize. So these are who I'm calling unknown or mystery matches. And there's many different ways that you can try to identify who they might be. And I've listed several of them here. The only one we're going to talk about tonight is viewing the shared matches, or maybe it's called in common with matches. We're not going to cover those other options. We might cover those in a future webinar. But tonight we're just going to look at shared matches. So you might be saying, what is a shared match? What is an in common with match? Well, each of the testing companies is going to give you a list of those on your individual match page with that match. But basically what it means is that this named match appears on your match list as a match for you, and it also appears on your mystery matches match list. So the shared matches are people that appear on both of your match lists. So basically this implies that the 3 of you have a common ancestor. So if you figure out how you are related to the shared matches, then you can estimate how you might be related to this mystery match. And you should be able to find a common ancestor couple, especially if it's a pretty close match. The further back matches, it's not going to be so easy, but with the closer matches, you should be able to find a common ancestor couple that all 3 of you descend from. And that would be you, your shared match, and the mystery match. So when you're looking at the shared matches that you share with a mystery match, you're going to want to look at the identity of the shared match. Maybe you recognize their name. You want to look at the notes that you've made about them. So if you've been making copious notes, like I told you, like I advised you to do, you might already have made a note as to how you're related to that shared match. You want to look at the family trees of the shared matches, because that may give you a clue. And look at the group categories you place them in. So if you've already categorized them in a group, and that's going to be at Ancestry and MyHeritage, or if you put them on a spreadsheet from the other companies, you'll be able to know then how that match fits in. So these are the steps you're going to want to take. And this is my approach to it. And it's not, there's different approaches that you could take. So this is just my approach. When you're looking at the shared matches with an unknown match, identify if the unknown match is on your paternal or maternal side. You should be able to tell that from the shared match list. See if you can identify which grandparent's side it is on, again, from the shared matches. You may be able to further narrow it down to a great-grandparent or even a great-great-grandparent, depending on the quality of your shared matches and what you know about them. Then you want to study your tree to determine the possible most recent common ancestor couple. And then you want to add the match to the group for that couple and make notes in the note field indicating this is a guess or a possibility, because at this point, we're just trying to kind of ballpark where this person might be on your tree. We're not necessarily identifying their name. Maybe they used an alias, or exactly how they're related. So there are some other methods that people will use. Blaine Bettinger, I think, has some webinars on, and so does Diane Southard, about how to use shared matching to identify your unknown matches. And, certainly listen to those webinars. They're going to give you a slightly different perspective than I will. And all of us have our little ways of explaining it and our ways of our methodology, and they might be just slightly different. There is a methodology that you might have heard of. It's called the Leeds method. And this has been created by a woman named Dana Leeds. And she has a website called danaleeds.com. And she basically advocates you to make a color-coded spreadsheet. And the URL is right there on your screen, danaleeds.com, and then the Leeds method. And this is best used for adoptions or unknown father situations, in my opinion. But you could certainly use it just in general. You can play around with it and see how it works. But that's another method of using shared matches to determine relationships. Now, there are a couple situations where this technique that I'm going to tell you tonight will not work for you very well. And that would be if your parents or grandparents are closely related to one another in a recent time frame. Now, every once in a while, someone will come in and say, oh, I found out that my parents are 10th cousins, he. And that's fine. 10th cousins is not going to screw up this method. 10th cousin is actually a very, very distant matching. If your parents are third cousins to one another, something like that, or your grandparents, then that will mess up the shared matching to some degree. And so you may or may not be able to use this technique. Persons from an endogamous population. Now, I'm listing 3 of them, but there are more. Ashkenazi Jews, Amish Mennonites, the French Canadians, or the Acadians. These groups were all intermarried with one another over and over again. And so most of the people, if not all of them, will be shared matches with each other, even though they're not closely related. So again, this technique will not work very well and may not work at all for someone from those populations. But for the rest of us, let's carry on. We're going to look at this technique with all 4 of the testing companies now. but we're going to spend the most time on Ancestry because Ancestry is going to be the best one for using this technique. This is threefold because Ancestry has the most members, most people that have the most people who have tested their DNA. So you will probably have more matches at Ancestry. And people usually have a family tree on Ancestry, not always, but often. And they also have that grouping tool that I talked about where you can color code your matches by different groups. And that's extremely helpful. So I want you, if you've tested at Ancestry, that's probably where you want to practice this technique, is really do it at Ancestry because it's easiest to do there. So you just want to go to the top of your match list and find the first unknown match. And after categorizing that match, move down to the next one that is unknown. And continue, I'm going to say down to maybe your second to third cousin matches, down to about 90 centimorgans. You could go lower. It's going to get harder and harder the lower you get. So if you want to practice and have pretty good success, keep yourself at 90 centimorgans and above if you can. So this is my Ancestry match list. And you can see that Ancestry puts the colored groupings over on the far right here. So you can see that DP and AD have already been categorized and they have a little dot. So that means I've identified them. I know who they are. AD, I actually made some notes, not very extensive ones I can see. And DP, apparently I forgot. So I need to go back and do that. So the top match that I have that I do not know who it is NG. And while this person has a tree, apparently I can't figure out who it is from the tree. So let's go ahead and view the match with NG. So NG, we can see her tree. She's got 7 people in it. And it's not very extensive, but I did more research on these people. So I just typed in their names and was trying to poke around and see who they were. And I was able to figure out who they are. I know who NG's parents were and her grandparents. I filled in the grandparents and the great grandparents. None of these people are in my tree. So there's no surnames of interest that seem to be in common. Now that's a whole other problem. And for the sake of this talk tonight, we're going to pretend that I don't know the answer. I do know the answer, but we're going to pretend I don't know the answer. But usually when this happens, there's some kind of disconnect in the tree, either in my tree or in her tree, where somebody may not be the correct person. Maybe they're putting in an adopted person's parents instead of the birth parents, or maybe there's somebody's daddy that wasn't really their daddy, that kind of thing. But anyways, so NG's tree is no help to us because we just don't see any commonalities between her tree and my tree. And she's a pretty close match of mine. Remember, she's a first to second cousin, sharing 369 centimorgans. So I need to go to the shared matches. So this is where the shared matches is on Ancestry. You can see it's the middle of the page, and then over to the right a little bit, right by my big arrow. So if I click on shared matches, it brings up a new list. And there are pages and pages of matches, and I'm showing you only 3 of them. So you're going to want to scroll down through the list of shared matches and really do it as much as you can to try to identify enough of them that you can solve the mystery. So with NG, I've put down that these 3 matches basically will solve it. So the shared matches that are important are my paternal aunt, SR, and SF. So SR and SF are identified, and you can see I've made a bunch of notes about who they are, and I've color coded them. So SR is a purple dot referring to Jacob Allen and Melinda Allen as the common ancestor couple. And then this kind of turquoise dot is George Brown and Sarah Kennedy being the common ancestor couple. So basically the matches are Allen, Brown, and Kennedy. So what we've deduced is we know it's on my father's side because it's a shared match with my aunt, my paternal aunt. It's shared matching with cousins on the Brown and the Allen side, according to what we saw with those notes that I had made. So we need to view my genealogical tree and figure out where the Allens and the Browns come in. So here's my genealogical tree. And you can see that we're not on my mother's side. So we're crossing out my mother's side. This is my father's side we're needing to look at. And we're not looking at Fanny's side. So this is my grandmother, my paternal grandmother. No, none of the matches are coming through her. So they're coming through David Allen, my paternal grandfather. And if you recall, one of my shared matches there to NG. So these are shared matches with NG. One of them was descended from Jacob and Melinda Allen, and they're the blue group up here. The other one was descended from George Brown and Sarah Kennedy, the brown or the turquoise group here. So where do the Allen and Brown lines converge? Well, they converge here with the marriage of David and Alice. So if NG has DNA from Allens up here, Browns and Kennedys down here, and there's only one marriage between those two families on my tree, and that's between David and Alice, then NG has to be a descendant of this couple. Now, this is the part that you have to logically think through for all of your matches that you're looking at, these unknown matches. When you get some shared matches, you need to be able to deduce on your tree where it is that that person is coming in, and based on the DNA that they're sharing. So remember, for NG to have Allen matches and Brown matches, she has to be descended from this common ancestor couple with me, David Allen and Alice Brown. They're the only Allen and Brown marriage that we have. So I've not yet, from this exercise, figured out who NG is. And I don't know exactly how she connects, but I do know what branch of my family that she's coming from. And I didn't know that before. So I know she's paternal. I know she's from an Allen and Brown marriage. And so I'm going to add her to their group of matches. And so at Ancestry, this is how you add to group. Remember, we're on the match page between me and NG. Clicking on add to group, I either create a group for David Allen and Alice Brown, or I add her to an already created group that I had made. And then I'm going to add a note. And I listed people like this in the notes as probably. So there may be some weird way that she might not be descended from them, but it's almost probable that she's descended from David Allen and Alice Brown. And so I put the word probably in to indicate that I haven't verified it fully. I haven't identified her. I don't know what branch of David and Alice's tree she comes off of, but based on the shared matching, this is what I've come up with. Now, let's repeat this with the next unknown match that we have. And in this case, it's JM. And JM has no tree at all. So we have nothing to go on about JM. We don't know his name. We don't know his tree. Nothing to go on. So we're going to view the match. And then we're going to hit on the shared matches button again, which is right here again in the middle where it says shared matches. You click on that. And this one is not going to be as easy to figure out. So we're going to have to look at 4 matches in order to figure this out, 4 or 5. So the first match that I'm highlighting, and remember, there are many more than just these that I'm highlighting. So you want to go through them kind of until you figure it out. So you're going down the shared match list. So the first one is with a maternal uncle. So now I know that this is a maternal match. We have a match to DP and GA, who I know, and I have extensive notes about them again. These are my extensive notes down here telling me how I'm related to them. I'm also color coded them into match groups. So the common families are Willison, Leper, and Edgett so far. So then we're going to go down to see some more shared matches between me and JM. So additional shared matches with me and JM include this person here, which is important, AO, and they are descended from John Willison and Lydia Kellogg. And this Spencer and Eris is just kind of, I don't know why I left that on there. We're going to ignore that. But this is the key one right here. And again, the pink dot is John and Lydia. So now we've added matches to Willison and Kellogg. So we need to know, let's go back to the previous page. We need to look for where the Willison, Leper, Edgett, Willison, and Kellogg families fit in on my tree. So we know it's mother's side because it matches with my uncle. We know it's a shared match with Jason and Jesse. Oh, Jason and Jesse are married. And then we have a shared match with Jason's parents' descendants and Jesse's parents' descendants. So again, we need to look for all these names on my tree. So let's look at my tree. And this time we're crossing out my dad's side. This is not related to my dad's side at all. It's on my mom's side. And it's not related to the Mitchells. So it's not related to my grandpa, not related to my maternal grandpa. It's related to my maternal grandma, Helen. And you can see here that Jason Willison and Jesse Leper are her parents. And then their parents are John Willison and Lydia Kellogg, and John Leper and Phoebe Edgett. So basically, we find ourselves in the same situation we were before with NG. So the only place on my tree where a Willison and a Leper are married is right here at the first great-grandparent level. And so for the match, I think his name was JM, to have Willison and Kellogg matches and Leper and Edgett matches, it means that he has DNA from both of those couples. And the only way he can have DNA from both of those couples is through this marriage here. There's only place on my tree where this happens. So again, we've basically figured out that JM has to be from this couple, Jason and Jesse. And so we have not identified his name, and we don't know exactly how he descends from Jason and Jesse. But because he's shared matches with both Willisons and Lepers back to the previous generation, then he's got Willison and Leper DNA. The only way he could have that is if he's a descendant of this couple. So I'm going to add him to their group at Ancestry. So my group for Jason Willison and Jesse Leper. And I'm going to make a note again that this is a probable identification, but you know, it's not a done deal. I haven't finished the identification. Okay. So I would continue doing this, like I said, about down to 90 centimorgans. You can keep going after that. I would say around 50 centimorgans, it might become harder and harder for you to figure it out. You might have too many colored dots or not enough colored dots. You might get lost. You may have to employ some different methods when you get down into those lower level matches. 50 centimorgans, 40 centimorgans, 30 centimorgans in common with you. And we're not going to cover any advanced techniques tonight. We're just going to do this basic technique that we're talking about right now. Okay, so that was showing you at Ancestry what I would do. And like I said, I think you should do a lot of practicing at Ancestry just because it's really simple and there's going to be a lot of matches and just a lot of things are going to be working in your favor that you might be able to identify a lot of your matches this way. Now we're going to move on to the other testing companies. So MyHeritage. So we're just going to do the same thing. You're going to get to your match list at MyHeritage and you're going to find the first unknown match that you have. So at MyHeritage, I have some very poor matches for me, myself. And so what I'm showing you are actually my Aunt AW's matches. So we're calling her Aunt AW. And she has some better matches than I do. And so it'll be more instructive for us to look at the matches from her perspective. So Aunt AW, here's her match list. And you can see on MyHeritage, the colored dots are over on the left. On Ancestry, they were over on the right, and MyHeritage are over on the left. And you can see SK and RB are color coded. So we've identified who they are. So the first unknown match is this DM. They have no color coding here, and so we don't know who they are. So we're going to review the DNA match here on the right. This will take us to the match page between Aunt AW and DM. So there's a lot of information on this review DNA match page, but you want to get down to the shared DNA matches. That's what it's called at MyHeritage. And on this page, it's set up a little differently than Ancestry. So the shared match name is in the middle here. So there's SP, there's RB, and there's more. And then on this side, it's showing you the relationship of SP to DM. And on this side, it's showing you the possible relationship of SP to Aunt AW. So that can be confusing if you don't know what you're looking at. So basically, I went through a long list of shared matches between Aunt AW and DM, and the only one I could identify was SP. So this is unfortunate. This does not help us fully identify who DM might be. It gives us a hint as to what part of the tree to look on, but it doesn't get us all the way there. So basically, like I said, we have very limited people in our family that I've tested at MyHeritage. And so I haven't identified all of these. I haven't identified very many of the matches. So I don't have a lot of known matches. I could work on this some more and maybe I would get better at it. But right now, like I said, SP was the only one we could identify. So you can see the color coding right there. And the color coding indicates that SP is descended from John Kellogg and Jane Spencer. Now, so we're going to do the best we can with this. We're going to make a preliminary identification. So we know that this is on AW's father's side of the family. We know it's on her maternal grandmother's side of the family, and that the shared match is descended from John Kellogg and Jane Spencer. So let's view the tree just to get an idea of what's going on there. So this is Aunt AW's tree, and you can see that it's not on her mother's side. It's on the father's side up here under Jason Willison, and then it's his mother, Lydia Kellogg. Her parents are John Kellogg and Jane Spencer. So that's how our one shared match that we can identify is related to DM. So you might say, well, then DM has to be descended from this couple. No, she doesn't. She could be descended from only one side of the family. She could be descended from the Kellogg's only or the Spencers only. We need more than one shared match is basically the gist of that. With only the one shared match, we don't have enough information to say. If we had 2 or 3 shared matches or even 4 or 5, and they were pointing in the direction of the Kellogg's or pointing in the direction of the Spencers or pointed in both directions, then we would have a better idea. Right now, all we can say is it's either DM is either descended from this couple or she's descended from somewhere on this tree or somewhere on this tree. Might even be another generation back on the Eaton side or on the Eris side. We just don't know. So basically, we want to get some more shared matches that we can identify, and we need to do more research on some of those shared matches. And that's really the only way we're going to be able to place DM into a group positively. Or we can try to communicate with DM, which I haven't talked about, but that is an option. You can message these people, you can talk to them. Sometimes that's more, it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people don't reply. So that's the conclusion that we came to. It's not a great conclusion, but we have identified a certain part of the tree that we can focus on, but we don't have as clear an idea of how DM might be related. Okay, let's move on to 23andMe. And at 23andMe, we're going to do the same thing. So 23andMe, we're going to start again with our highest level unknown matches. The thing about 23andMe, the two things about 23andMe are, number one, only a few people on 23andMe have a tree. They make it really hard for you to add your tree, and people don't do it. And they also don't allow you to group the matches in 23andMe itself. You can't create little groups of matches. So this is where you'd have to be keeping a separate spreadsheet or chart or something that would allow you to record how you're related to these matches and remember it. So 23andMe is harder to work with because of that. And sometimes you're going to have limited success with doing this with 23andMe. It can be done, but it's hard. It's harder. It's a lot harder. So here's my match list at 23andMe. And I've identified LG and NG. So the first person I want to look at is DR. And he's my first unknown match. So on the match page between me and DR, you can see it gives me some information. It says I might be a second cousin with him. And then down at the very bottom of your match page is something that's called relatives in common. And this is where you want to look at 23andMe. And again, there were many, many relatives in common, and I'm not showing you all of them. I'm showing you the top ones. So basically, the first one is a paternal aunt of mine. That's MA. And this is showing me that my relationship to her is aunt. And her relationship to DR, my unknown match, is first cousin once removed. And remember that this is an estimate. They don't know that she's a first cousin once removed. It's just kind of a guess. So I know right away this is a paternal side match. Then the next three people, CS, SR, and KH, are all descended from my great-grandparents, David Allen and Alice Brown. We've talked about them before. We're talking about them again. Sorry. I have a lot of matches from that side of the family. And then PD and BW are unknown to me. I don't know who they are. And then RR is DR's daughter. So DR, the match that I'm looking at right now, trying to identify, it's his daughter. And I know that because it tells me that right here. It says RR's relationship to DR, daughter, in this column right here. And her relationship to me is third cousin. Okay. Now, I went down through a bunch of the other matches, the shared matches between me and DR, and I could not figure out how I am related to them. So unfortunately, I'm now in the same position with DR that I was with DM over at MyHeritage. And that is, I'm kind of stuck. I know it's a paternal match. I know it's on my paternal grandfather's side, but I don't know anything further. So let's look at our tree. And we've been here before. We know David and Alice Brown are my paternal grandfather's parents. And I have three shared matches to this couple. So, but I don't have any other shared matches that lead me into the direction of the Allen side or the Brown Kennedy side. And so I just don't have enough information. I don't have enough shared matches that I was able to identify that I can tell whether this match is descended from David and Alice, or if they're descended from just the Allens or just the Browns, or they're even further back on the tree on either one of those, on any of those branches. So I can get it this far, but I can't get it further without getting more shared matches and more information. So again, I'm kind of waiting to see if I get more shared matches. if I can identify more of my shared matches and work with my 23andMe matches better. But right now, I'm kind of stuck again with identifying DR. So let's move on to family tree DNA. Family tree DNA is a similar scenario to MyHeritage or to 23andMe. Basically, you cannot group your matches into match groups on the website. So you're gonna have to keep a separate spreadsheet or something. And there are more family trees on family tree DNA. People are encouraged to add a family tree. So that's a little better. Now it's the smallest database size. So I have the fewest matches at family tree DNA. And I don't have great matches again. So that's going to lead me to some difficulty in identifying matches again as well. So here's my match page at Family Tree DNA, and this is the Family Finder test, which is the autosomal DNA test. You can see that I've identified SS and RB. This is a known cousin on mother's side, known cousin on father's side. My first unknown match is DC, and you can see he's only sharing 67 centimorgans with me. So he is under the 90 centimorgans that I really wanted us to concentrate on, 90 centimorgans and above. I'm having to go below that because he's my first unknown match. I really have very few matches that are of a high consequential level. So in order to see the matches in common at Family Tree DNA, you want to go over here to this right side and click on this icon that looks like a person. And when you do that, it opens up and it says in common with or not in common with. And I'm going to hit on in common with to get the in common with matches between me and DC. So then we get this new screen and it tells me at the top, I'm looking at my matches in common with DC, and there's 125 of them. So again, I'm only showing you the top 4. But basically, I kind of scrolled down through quite a bit down through the list, and I didn't recognize any of the other matches. The only one I recognized is my paternal great aunt, BA. So, and you can see that she's my highest level match. I share 892 centimorgans with her. The next highest match, that's a shared match between me and DC, JJ, I share only 34 centimorgans with him. This is really low. He could be my 4th or 5th cousin with that little amount of DNA that we share. And he doesn't have a tree. CO doesn't have a tree, and CV has a tree, but I didn't notice any common names on it. So basically, I'm not able to really learn a lot about DC either. I can say that he's on my paternal side, and I can say he's on my paternal grandfather's side. But I can't get any further again. I'm still stymied. So let's look at the tree one more time. And it's the same spot as before. I said, remember I told you I have a lot of matches to David Allen and Alice Brown. So my great aunt that is a shared match between me and DC is the daughter of David Allen and Alice Brown. So we know that that's where on the tree we kind of have to start looking. But again, we don't have enough information to say whether DC, who's probably a 3rd, 4th, or 5th cousin of mine, whether he's an Allen from the Allen side or a Brown or a Kennedy from those sides. We just don't know. We don't have enough information. We don't have enough shared matches that we can identify. So again, I need to do further research, and I may need to wait for more matches to come in, or more matches with trees, so I can work with those. So basically, that's why I told you to really practice it at Ancestry, because I think you'll be most successful doing this at Ancestry. The other companies, it depends on the strength of your matches at those companies. If you have a lot of great matches at MyHeritage, maybe this will work out great for you at MyHeritage. You know, it didn't really work out so great for me, but I also need to do more work on those on the matches just to make sure that I'm identifying them, the ones that I can identify. Now, so this is basically a review of what we talked about tonight. you should be able to, by looking at the shared matches, figure out if your unknown match is paternal or maternal. You should be able to identify which grandparent it's from, hopefully, and you may be able to narrow it down further depending on how many shared matches you have and if you can identify them. You want to study your tree and really try to understand how that person could have the different shared matches with you, and what had to happen in order to make them be a shared match with you at that level. And then you want to add the person to the group for that couple if you've identified a most recent common ancestor couple, and make some notes in the note field. So I hope that this has helped you kind of take another step in working with your DNA matches. And again, this is not the end of our journey. There is going to be a part 3 of working with autosomal DNA matches for beginners. And I don't know exactly when I'll be offering that, but it'll probably be the next few months. And it also will be recorded so that you can watch it over again as needed. And you can go back and watch parts 1 and parts 2. So I think we are ready for some questions.
There we go. Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was fabulous. There are questions, surprise, surprise. And there's been some great discussion in the chat as well. I've kind of enjoyed seeing what people are saying. Okay, so here's a question. What if you don't put your tree on Ancestry or MyHeritage? How does one find the MRCA then?
Well, I would say, people have a lot of different reasons why they aren't comfortable putting their tree up. But I would say that both of those companies, if you do put your tree up, it's really going to give you a lot of hints to work with your DNA. It'll make it so much easier for you to work with your DNA matches. That I encourage you to kind of think through what are your reasons that are stopping you from putting your tree up, and whether you can maybe change your mind on that idea. If you do not do that, if you decide you definitely are against putting your tree on those sites, then you're going to have to do more manual work where you're going into the trees of your matches and looking, for common ancestors. And I didn't have to do that as much because Ancestry and MyHeritage were suggesting it to me, and it was coming from computer generated lists from them. But if you're not having that because you don't have your tree attached, then you're going to have to do it manually. You're going to do it yourself by opening up their tree and painstakingly looking through for the surnames and finding the connection yourself. So it'll add some work to your, to the process, but you can still do it. It's just you'll be doing it manually. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So this one is a little bit more complicated. I don't know if you want to pull it up as well. But it says that their uncle did a Y111 test on family tree DNA. He only had 2 matches. Neither surname is in their family tree. They went to DNA on Ancestry, can definitely prove their surname line. One of the men that is a Y111 match has a pretty healthy tree. How do I go back through his tree to find the possible mistake or NPE? His email doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see you, Lois. I think that probably I should probably email with Lois about that because it's kind of a more complicated thing, and I think she knows how to get a hold of me actually. But any of you that want to email me about your particular situation can do so at the genealogy@acpl.info website or email address.
Yes, please reach out if you have a detailed question and you want to talk to Sarah about it.
Yeah, I think that's what probably we need to do.
Okay. How do you find DNA matches like your 2 times great grandparents?
I think she might be meaning when I was at the very beginning of the talk and I was showing those matches that came down
Yes.
from my second great grandparents. That was on through lines that I found that. And that again, that's on Ancestry, and it's a separate tab. So when you're in DNA, if you go to your DNA tab, there's a tab, or there's a option that says through lines. And if you go to your through lines, and it's where they collect DNA matches from different parts, from different ancestors of yours that you have, basically. It's based on trees. So you have to have your tree on Ancestry. So if you don't have your tree on Ancestry, then this is not going to work for you. But you should have through lines. You can go to the ancestor that you're looking for DNA matches from, say it's your second great grandparent, click on their name, and then it should show you that diagram that I showed of mine, basically, showing the different matches that are coming down from the different children of that second great grandparent. So if that didn't make sense, Marilyn, send us an email.
Awesome. Thank you. So this one's interesting, and I think it's still applicable. Although we aren't discussing messaging, is there a good way when reaching out to get an answer? I've sent messages to quite a few and never get a response, especially when contacting someone overseas.
Well, you got to remember that probably half to 3/4 of the people are not logging into their DNA account regularly. So they're not going to see your message because they maybe bought the test a long time ago, forgot about their login, just aren't checking it anymore. Or they may have passed away. I mean, they may not still be around to check it. Adoptees, there's a whole set of rules about how adoptees should approach their matches, because you don't want to scare them off. But if you're not an adoptee, which I'm thinking you're probably not based on the way you phrased your question, I'll tell you real quick what I do, and it doesn't always work, but I have a very brief kind of peppy message. And if you know me in person, I'm not particularly a peppy person, but I try to get real peppy with my messages, like, hey, I'm so glad to find you on Ancestry. I'm researching my family tree, and you're one of my matches. And I might say something about myself. I might say, oh, I live in Indiana and I'm a librarian, something like that. And then I might say something, I might ask them a question, maybe, if I can kind of think of something that would get them to answer me, actually, about the match. You don't want to go into a great deal of detail. You just want to kind of say something like, I noticed that you're matching on my father's side of the family. Here are some surnames on my dad's side of the family. There's Allens, and there's Browns, and there's Kennedys. Do you recognize any of those names? You might say something like that. And then you might say, give them your email address and say that you hope to work together on the family tree or something like that. So I don't know, some variation on that is usually how it works for me.
That makes sense. When you say you use the LEADS program to find out who someone is related to, is there a way to tell which side if you have no info on either parent? Mom was adopted and we only know dad's first name. Can you help us figure dad out?
Yes. So Allison, you can email me if you want me to give you more help on this, and I can kind of go through it with you. But if you go to that danaleads.com website and read through, she has very specific instructions for how to do the LEADS method. And it is developed for adopted people, basically. So it should be right in the wheelhouse of what you need. All you're doing in the LEADS method, and this is very general explanation of it, but all you're doing with the LEADS method is you're going to your top match. And so if you're looking at your mom's matches and she's adopted, then you're just going to your top match and you're color coding it a color. So let's say you give it a red dot, and then you're looking at the shared matches with that person and giving them all a red dot. And then you're going to your next match that isn't a red dot, and you're again giving them a different dot and giving all the shared matches the same color dot. And so you don't have to know anything about the trees of any of these people or anything. You're just using the colored dots and assigning them. So read up on the leads method at Dana Leads website, and it will, I hope, become clear. But certainly you can also email us about it.
I'm putting the email address in the chat because we only have time for one more question. So I wanted to make sure the email address got in there. Please, please, please shoot us an email if we do not get to your question. Also, Sarah is willing to help people. So let us know. And if you have any genealogy questions, we're happy to help. So someone has a very basic question. Is the value of doing this then to help verify that we are in fact descended from someone we've identified in our tree from the paper trail? Are there other reasons, particularly if the match doesn't have a tree that shows their research is further along than our own?
Well, I think the reason that I suggested that you do this is that you're trying to identify those unknown matches. So, you know, you've got somebody who's in your match list under the initials AP, and you have no idea who that is. AP is, you know, obviously initials. You don't know what A stands for. You don't know what P stands for. And they have no tree. So you can't figure out who they are based on their name or based on their tree. So the value of doing this, in my opinion, is that you're getting an idea of where on the tree that person might fall. And for someone who's obsessive compulsive like me, I want to know how I'm related to all of my matches. So,
oh goodness, Sarah. All right, well, we are out of time. Again, if you didn't get your question answered, please put your questions in the email, let us know. Also, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Sarah, for another wonderful presentation, per usual. And I hope you all are able to join us on Tuesday for another Genealogy Center program. Have a good evening. Bye, everybody.